It's October 26, 2023, which makes this an opportune point to give a brief overview of where every country in the Middle East stands on the Israel-Palestine thing prior to the ground invasion of Gaza. Now, I will give a trigger warning. If you are an Ivy League professor, be warned. This video will contain historical facts and logical consistency. I know this makes you unsafe, so please turn down the volume and hide under your desk for the duration of this video to avoid any emotional harm. Now, let's get going. We will start in Israel, where the key goal of the Israelis is not to be murdered by jihadis. That is their number one goal. You have the Gaza Strip, which is run by Hamas, whose platform is global jihad, world domination, and to kill every single Jew in the world to establish a caliphate. That is literally in their charter. They also want to return Spain and Portugal to the Islamic Wafik because they're lunatic Islamist terrorists. Now, in 2005, Israel took literally every Jew out of Gaza. The IDF grabbed them out of their homes and said, you know what? Without negotiation, we're just going to give you a state in Gaza. You have a Palestine now, have at it. There it is. We've created it. There's a Palestinian state. Go have fun. Have an election. Who won the election? Hamas. What was their platform? Read their charter. Their platform was global jihad and terrorism. They then won, and before they declared war on Israel, you had a bloody civil war, maybe one of the bloodiest points in Palestinian history. It's hard to know. What was bloodier? Was it the internal war between Hamas and Fatah in Gaza, or was it the internal war between the Palestinians during the first Intifada when they murdered every single moderate in their country? It's hard to know because no one counts Palestinian deaths when they're killed by other Palestinians, because again, no Jews, no news. So, Gaza, I feel bad for whoever doesn't support Hamas there and wants peace, but the majority of it is run by terrorists who want to kill every single Jew in the world. The general viewpoint of the Israelis and the Jewish people is, we don't want to be killed. We're not going to let it happen. So, after October 7th, after Hamas had declared war on Israel 17 years ago, again, they were given freedom, they were given a Judenrein land, no Jews, no settlers, no this, no occupation. Here, have at it, have a state. What did they do? They killed their own people, then immediately declared war on Israel, started firing rockets at them. Why is there a blockade? Yeah, because you can't, your government declared war on a country and then they were put under blockade during a war. Oh, how terrible, right? But now, it's finally gotten to the point where Israel's like, okay, screw this, we're declaring war back on them, so the war's gonna start. Which means, guys, this is a war. And in a war, people are going to fight a war. I know this is crazy to most people because whenever Israel's involved, everyone all of a sudden becomes an armchair general, but an armchair general without a plan. It's amusing and annoying, but it's just the way it is. Now, there's a lot going on here. You got the Russians, you got the Chinese, you got Americans, they all play into this. China doesn't really care about the Arab countries, not at all, but they are allied with them. China doesn't like Muslims too much because they put them all in concentration camps and are trying to systematically destroy their culture because the CCP is evil. But the Chinese mentality is essentially they don't turn their back on an old friend, and because the Arab states were aligned with the communists during the Cold War and thus backed China's communist nationhood, until the Arab countries turn against China, China won't turn against them, but they're not sending military assets to go and defend. They're there to mess around in the Mediterranean, but they're not getting involved. Same thing with the Russians, okay? The Russians have a history of using the Arab states as pawns. Go back to the 1967 war. It was the USSR who kept feeding false information to Egypt and Syria that Israel was preparing for war and about to attack imminently, causing them to build up troops on the border and increase skirmishes, because the USSR goal at the time is they wanted to draw the Americans into another conflict because they were bogged down in Vietnam. This is very similar now. Right? Russia's bogged down in a war in Ukraine that's being supported by Western powers, so they want to divert Western attention and Western focus to another front so they can have an easier time in Ukraine. The Russian warplanes are not coming in here because they don't care about the Arabs. They really don't. It's just Russia being Russia. This brings us to America, which is run by someone who is currently asleep, Joe Biden, who is an acolyte of Barack Obama, the worst foreign policy president of all time, with a State Department filled with Iranian spies. Malley, Sullivan, all these ding-dongs, they gotta go. Now, currently, the Islamic Republic of Iran, through their terrorist proxies, we'll get into them in a second, are trying to kill Americans, firing missiles at them. A great way to stop this is to try and kill the people who are trying to kill Americans. The people firing rockets at America, just shoot them. Blow them up. That will stop him. Remember Donald Trump? Remember in 2020 when the IRGC had their proxies in Hezbollah and Hash al-Shabi try and break into the U.S. Embassy in Iraq? And what did Donald Trump do? He blew up Qasem Soleimani. Great times. What did the Iranians do after that? They got scared and they stopped. But Joe Biden is continuing to appease them, and he thinks he can hug the terrorism away, which means Americans are eventually going to die to the hands of IRGC proxies because Joe Biden is asleep at the wheel. How this will play out, we'll have to see once Americans start dying. But I don't have any faith in the Biden administration's foreign policy cadre because, again, it has proven Iranian spies in it, and they're not doing anything about that. So, all right. Now, let's get into the major player here. Most of the bad ideas in the world and bad things are coming from the Islamic Republic of Iran. Not all of it. Qatar, bad guys. Turkey, too. Pakistan funding the global jihadi movement. But the primary bad actor here is the Islamic Republic of Iran and the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, not the Iranian one. The IRGC is very, very clear. They are not Iranian. Their goal is to spread the Islamic Revolution to the world and world domination. Look at the manual of the Quds Force. How do they do that? By creating different terrorist proxies all over the world, using them to sow chaos, and then leveraging that in their favor. Actual IRGC doctrine. So, major proxies in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Other parts of the world too, but those are the important ones for now. So, before we get to the Shia croissant, we'll go back there. Let's just point out Yemen here, which is the Houthis. Very big fans of Adolf Hitler. They teach how Nazism in their curriculums because that's just what the Islamic Republic of Iran believes in. They're currently firing missiles into Saudi Arabia. Now, this is interesting. You know, Iran, Saudi Arabia, not friends. So Saudi Arabia at the outset of October 7th, quiet. October 8th, we respect Palestinians. We must blah, 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 blah. But they've been shifting to say, oh, you know what, now two-state solution on the 67 lines, which is a nonsense, nothing statement, but that became it. And then you started seeing people on Saudi Arabian TV actually going after the Hamas members coming on to comment and brazenly lie there. Why? Because Saudi Arabia isn't stupid. They're not Ivy League professors. They know things. Again, sorry Ivy League professors, but again, they're hiding under the desk, so it's all fine. They know who their enemy is. They know who's firing rockets at them. They don't like the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they don't care about Palestinian civilians. None of the Arab countries really do. I mean, look at Palestinians are at best second-class citizens, usually third-class citizens in these countries. Now, Saudi Arabia was going to trying to normalize with Israel, and then they kind of took it off the table. And now they're talking about, oh, once the war ends, normalization, we can go back to talking about a peace treaty. What is the translation here? The Middle East, this is very important, is a place where strength is strength. Diversity is not your strength in the Middle East. Strength is your strength. People respect strength. And the stronger you are perceived to be, the more likely you are to gain allies in that region. So the translation of what the Saudis are saying is, if Israel crushes Hamas and destroys, the militants and terrorists within Gaza, we will have peace with them. That is what they are saying. It's not about hugging and finding a solution that respects. That's not what they are saying. That's what they'll say to the Westerners because they know that we're stupid and we need some sort of nonsense pablum to keep us happy. But the actual translation of what the Saudis are saying is, crush Hamas, crush the spirit of resistance in Gaza, and then we can have peace. That's actually what the Middle East is like. Okay, so that's the big power players here. Now, let's go into the Islamic Republic of Iran, and their main goal is to sort of create what you call the Shia croissant. So you have the Islamic Republic of Iran, that's Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. That gives them a pathway to the Mediterranean Sea here. This makes Lebanon the big threat, as it has a better supply route from the Islamic Republic of Iran than the Palestinian territories. All right, let's go in order. Iraq. I don't know who the Prime Minister of Iraq is. I have to look his name up every time because I always forget it because he's not important. He's not important. He doesn't matter. He's less important than you are. He's a straight puppet of the IRGC. So Iraq has fallen. Oops, sorry about that. Syria. Bashar al-Assad is basically the 29th province of Iran. He openly said, he owes his seat to the IRGC, who saved his ass during the civil war. Interestingly enough, a lot of the Assadists and Syrian civil war atrocity deniers are now using those same atrocities to smash Israel. So all the videos that were fake news over the last 10 years because they showed Assad as a bloodthirsty monster, all of a sudden we can now use them to bash Israel. Interesting enough. Syria is also a great example of why Arab countries don't care about Palestinians one bit. You ever hear what happened at the Palestinian refugee camp at Yarmouk? We'll get into these refugee camps in a bit. Bombed the hell, bombed hospitals, bombed this. They don't Assad didn't call and say, hey, run away before we bomb you. No. Hey, Palestinians, you want human rights? That was the response. And again, no one cared because no one cares about Palestinians unless they can blame Israel. That's the thing. Except for, there was a few people there. I'll give credit to the people who were talking about it. But again, if there's a Palestinian human rights activist who didn't say anything about Yarmouk, don't care. Now, the country I care the least about and their opinions is actually Lebanon. So Lebanon's the big problem because half the country is basically controlled by Hezbollah, half of that is anti-Hezbollah. Remember, in 2019, there were, before COVID, massive uprisings in Iraq, Lebanon, and Iran. This is Bloody November, where people were pushing back against the Iranian influence in their country because under the Trump sanctions, they didn't have money to start bribing people into acquiescence. So there's a significant amount of social discontent in Lebanon against Hezbollah. So I'll give the shout out to the Lebanese people. What I will not grant the Lebanese people is I will not for 1 second entertain any Lebanese person who pretends to care about Palestinians. Not for a second. Until the 1990s, Palestinians weren't allowed to leave these refugee camps. They weren't even second-class citizens. They were at best third-class citizens, ultimately fourth-class citizens in Lebanon. They were not allowed to leave the refugee camps. They were not allowed to get work. So you want to talk about Palestinian human rights, Lebanese people? How about you free your own Palestinians and then we'll talk? Hey, how about when Palestinian citizens in Lebanon have full civil and human rights, then we can talk about how much you care about whatever. But until now, right, your country's run by Hezbollah, and a lot of them know it. How did that explosion in Beirut happen? Oh, who stores lots of ammunition under civilian buildings? Hezbollah. Where do they get their money? Islamic Republic of Iran. So Lebanon, no one cares what you have to say. No one. Moving on to other countries where I don't care what they have to say, we have Jordan and Egypt. Now, Jordan and Egypt have both reached peace with Israel through peace through strength. And again, the Jordanians got peace through Israel because they're like, oh, we created the PLO, now they're attacking us. Israel, can you help us get rid of Yasser Arafat and his goons? And they were like, fine. Remember Black September? That was, all the Arab countries bombing Palestinians to get them out of Jordan? Pepper's Farm remembers. So when the Jordanians go, oh, the Palestinians, blah, blah, blah. No one cares. No one cares what you have to say. You know the PLO and the Palestinian, all these government organizations. You helped create them. You know they're terrorists. You know they're bad for your country. So shut up. Egypt is also interesting. So Egypt used to control the Gaza Strip. Now Egypt has a southern border with Gaza. And it's closed off. The Rafah border crossing closed off. And they blew up tunnels. There's like a 30-foot concrete wall that goes underground, preventing any Palestinians getting into Egypt. Why? Because Egypt is run by Sisi, and his main opponent is the Muslim Brotherhood, who tried to take over the country after the fall of Hosni Mubarak. You had Mohammed Morsi, who wanted to create basically an Egyptian caliphate and jihad all day. It was then Sisi who had to throw a coup to stop an Islamist dictatorship, make it a military dictatorship. He knows his biggest enemy is the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas is the militant wing of the Muslim Brotherhood, and a lot of the people in Gaza have been brainwashed by Muslim Brotherhood propaganda through the United Nations, UNRWA, which is essentially an arm of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, Egypt and Jordan want 0 Palestinians. They will let 0 Palestinians in because they see them as a significant security threat and sort of an internal, cohesive societal threat because their Muslim Brotherhood beliefs. Because the Muslim Brotherhood is the chief opponent of the monarchy and the military dictatorship in each of those countries. So that's important to know. What does this all mean? Well, going into the ground war, you're going to have a lot of rah, 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 rah. But when the ground war happens, you're going to kind of see where everyone falls. The big determinant will be, what does Hezbollah do in Lebanon? What do the IRGC proxies, Hash al-Shabi, Hezbollah, all of them, what do they do to American forces stationed there? Will Joe Biden wake up from his nap and try and protect American servicemen? We don't know. All of these questions will probably be answered at the start of the ground war. But there's one thing I want to sort of point out before we leave, which is these refugee camps and Palestinian refugees in the United Nations. This is very key to understanding the conflict. Palestinian refugees aren't real refugees. They're not under the same definition. Oh, that's so terrible to say. Blah, blah, blah. No, it's the truth. UNHCR, which handles global refugees, does not handle Palestinian refugees. That's under UNRWA. There is a separate UN group for Palestinian refugees, and there's also a separate definition for Palestinian refugees versus real refugees. A lot of my friends are refugees from the Islamic Republic of Iran, former political prisoners. They were refugees. They're now in Canada. They're no longer refugees because they've been granted Canadian citizenship, so they lose their refugee status. That's good because they're not refugees. They're Canadians now. Same thing in America and everywhere else. But that's not how it works for Palestinians. A Palestinian refugee is a refugee forever. It's also hereditary. The definition of a Palestinian refugee is anyone who had a relative living in the land of Israel for 2 years between 1922 and 48. The numbers might be a bit different, but it's essentially there. So if your great-great-grandfather or whatever worked on a Zionist farm for 3 years and then left in 1935 to go to Jordan to meet a girl or whatever there, the UNRWA considers him a Palestinian refugee, right? But not only that, he could marry his wife and then he had kids. What are those kids born in Jordan who never saw the war? They are Palestinian refugees. Now, that one of those kids, hypothetically, moves to America. He starts a new life there, and he does pretty well for himself. He starts a business, and he becomes a millionaire. I'm very happy for his success. He marries a beautiful girl who's the love of his life, and they have children. What are those children? Those children are called Palestinian refugees. One of those children then goes to marry the Queen of England. He then becomes part of the British royal family. What is he? King of England? Prince of England? No, he's a Palestinian refugee. This is literally that. So when people say, oh, look at the displacement caused by Israel, it's bullshit. It's just people having babies in other parts of the world, and then we call them Palestinian refugees. It's insane. Now, what's important to note here? Palestinian refugees receive 4 times the amount of international funding that regular refugees do. So when all these Arab countries have Palestinian refugee camps, and they're not allowed to leave the refugee camps, they must stay there, they must be Palestinians, and they're born forever. All those countries get tons and tons and tons of funding from us, stupid Westerners, to help the Palestinian refugees. It's a money laundering scam, dummies. That's what it is. That's why all these Arab nations keep rah-rah-rahing. Israel's a great boogeyman to use. No one talks about their own internal human rights abuses. And they make billions of dollars by keeping the Palestinians in literal open-air prisons forever, not allowing them to work, making sure they have babies and whatever, and those babies are all very mad because they get tons and tons of money from stupid Westerners who are so afraid to call them out. This is the problem. So, again, if you're a Palestinian and you have a problem with Israel and you have some complaints, and my grandmother in 1937 taught an Israeli soldier and he... Fine, I'll talk to you. We can have it out. I will listen to a Palestinian. I will not listen to anyone else in the Arab world complain about Israel. I don't care about Lebanon. I don't care about Syria. I don't care about Jordan. I don't care about Egypt. I don't care about Saudi Arabia. I don't care about Qatar, Iran. I don't care what any of these people in these countries have to say because all of them abuse Palestinian civilians whenever they can. So, unless you're a country that grants full human rights to Palestinians, I don't care what you have to say in this conflict because you're all massive hypocrites. And you want to be pro-Palestinian? How about you address some of the issues in your country pertaining to the Palestinians before you go around doing this? So this is why when you see the ground invasion start, a lot of these countries going rah, 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 we're going to do this, we're going to do that, they're probably going to shut up and do what they've been doing for years because none of them care 1% about any Palestinian.